Register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Wednesday. It is May 13th, 2020. Thanks so much for joining me. Another jam-packed episode. I had an amazing interview with Professor Harvey J. Kaye. He's a historian and author. I'm going to bring you that interview later on in this episode, as well as the full interview for patrons. But the conversation really hinged on radicalism in America, the American tradition of radicalism, and how do we move forward to demand from America its lofty promises. You don't want to miss that interview. That's coming up. But first, let's talk about this bill that Democrats, that's a Freudian slip. But the Democrats, the House Democrats have unveiled. It's 1,800 pages, and it does hardly anything for the average person. It does do something. If you got $1,200 before, you'll get $1,200 again. The difference is that this time you'll get $1,200 for your kids instead of $500 for your kids. So if you're a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children, you'll get $4,800 one-time check. But this also bails out lobbyists. It's another corporate bailout. It bails out debt collectors. Okay. And this is what this is what is being done from the Democrats. This is what's being offered from the Democrats before it even goes to the Senate. It is a complete capitulation. I guess maybe the negotiation room here is that they're saying, okay, we're going to ask for $1,200 per kid, and then we expect them to negotiate back down to the $500. But it really shows you your values. Nancy Pelosi is the one who always says, show me your budget, I'll show you your values, right? Matter of fact, don't let me just quote it. Let me play it for you.
Fond of saying around here, show me your values, show me your budget.
Show me your budget, show me your values. So you show me your bailout, you show me your values. Your values is in protecting lobbyists, protecting debt collectors, protecting corporations, and giving the people just enough, because the people, and now I'm going to be clear, a family who gets $4,800 right now is going to be so grateful because they're basically desperate. It's going to be hard for somebody to it's brilliant in the sense that the American ruling elite have created conditions where people are so desperate for anything that they can get, so that if a family of 4 gets $4,800, they are going to be ecstatic. The cost of that $4,800, however, is a bill, trillions of dollars, that goes to corporations, goes to lobbyists, and even debt collectors. And this one-time bill, mind you, the way they're doing it is they're creating structural incentives, advantages, and bailouts for corporations, for these lobbyists. They're making sure that this is not a one-time handout to them. However, for the people, this is a one-time deal. So in other words, if anything is going to happen for the people again, there has to be more legislation. But everyone else, well, they have a system structured to help them. The Congressional Progressive Caucus called for $2,000 a month. This is the number. This is what we've been calling for a long time. I've been saying it since the first day I realized how long this was going to be, how long this epidemic was going to be. People have been calling for it, $2,000 a month. And no, you get $1,200 one time. It's means tested over, I believe, $7,500, $150,000 for a family of 2. So Americans are in a desperate enough situation to actually be grateful for this kind of money. But this is what you get in exchange. According to the Democratic Policy Center, they said House Democrats' new CARE Act proposal would expand the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, and make it eligible to all 501c4 and C6 groups with under 500 employees. According to their research at the Policy Center, Democratic Policy Center, this covers about 99.9% of C6 trade groups. This means that even the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the big business lobby, could access PPP under the new proposal. And as we saw with the last distribution of PPP, big businesses got bailed out while small businesses did not, and particularly minority businesses got nothing. are next to nothing. As a matter of percentages, like 95% of black-owned businesses got nothing. And now they're making it possible for lobbyists to access this, to get their checks covered during this pandemic. The priority, show me your budget, show me your values. Here are your values. The Democrats are also trying yet again and again, to get the state and local taxes deduction limit waived or increased, rather. Right now, the SALT tax deduction, I believe, is about $10,000. And this is where you could deduct on your federal income taxes what you would pay, what you paid in state and local taxes. Democrats are trying to increase that. And this has given the Republican Party the opportunity to grandstand as if the Republican Party actually gives a shit about working people. The Republican Ways and Means Committee, this is what they tweeted out this morning. They said, quote, "The American people are hurting, but Democrats continue to show us that they will never let a crisis go to waste. Instead of delivering real relief for local communities, Pelosi is trying to roll back the SALT tax that gives a huge boost to the wealthy elite." Now, just in case you think that the Republicans actually give a shit about working people, keep in mind that there are quite a few Republican states that don't have any state income tax. Florida and Texas come to mind in particular. So it's not as though that they actually give a shit about working people. It's that a lot of their representatives aren't affected by this, so they can grandstand on this. So it is across the board, seems to be another handout for the wealthiest. It is a stupid it's stupid politically because you're giving Republicans, you're basically putting everything on the line to say, hey, we want to soften this up as much as we can, make it as sweet as we can for Republicans so that they don't turn us down. Obviously, Republicans are going to fight this tooth and nail. That's just because that's what they do. Okay. And then there was a rejection of a lot of progressive ideas, particularly the $2,000 a month, because, well, according to House aides, Pelosi didn't like the fact that there was no Republican support for those things. So here Democrats are showing their negotiating prowess, or the lack thereof, trying to offer Republicans an offer that they can't refuse, when in reality, Republicans are very capable of refusing any offer, no matter how nice it is, no matter how beneficial it is, because Republicans understand the fundamental nature of being in an opposition party in the House of Representatives, which they are. And in the Senate run by Republicans, Mitch McConnell, there's no opportunity that he won't take to stick it to the Democratic Party. And so they're going to ask for more. It's not that they're going to turn down this bill. It's not that they're going to reject it. They've already set the precedent. I don't think they're going to have a problem giving us the little pittance because they see how lucrative it is for the ruling elite of this country. So, of course, Republicans are going to take this bill and sweeten it even more. And then they're going to go back to reconciliation, and Democrats are going to do what Democrats do, which is capitulate. And the bad thing about it is that Americans are so desperate. The working people in this country are so desperate. They're starving. There are people in bread lines. Literally, this is not hyperbole. I mean, the mutual aid organizations, people are giving money to people to keep them from starving. Okay? And people are in such a desperate position that they are excitedly waiting on this next check, even though in exchange for this check, we are going to enshrine income inequality, wealth inequality at levels like we've never seen before. And so if the average American wants to eat, if the average American doesn't want their children to starve, they have to be willing to capitulate and give the ruling elite everything they ever dreamed of, while they give us the crumbs from the master's table. This next story is enraging, and that's the only way I could describe it. It is a story of Breonna Taylor from Louisville, Kentucky. She was a 26-year-old EMT, and she was gunned down in her home. She was shot 8 times back in March, and the story is starting to get some national prominence. I think it may have hit the radar on the national level last week or maybe a week and a half ago. But it is another example of the gross incompetence and the police state, the gross incompetence of police and the police state. They were executing a no-knock warrant. Basically, they now have the ability to just kick your door down and go in and execute a warrant. It turns out they went to the wrong house. And because the people in the house tried to defend themselves because they thought it was a burglary, the police officers shot and killed 26-year-old Breonna Taylor. I want you to take a listen to this clip of her auntie as she talks about what happened.
They took like a big part of our life away from us, and she was a good girl. She just did not deserve what she went through, and we're gonna get justice for her. Because of incompetent police work, they went in her house in the comfort of her own home and just took her from us. She's gone. She's never coming back. Both their lives have been changed, her and Kenny. And we just want to thank y'all for her support. And I want y'all to know Breonna loved everybody. She loved everybody, and she is the reason why we all here. She was the glue that brought everybody together. She was the baby of the family. And for us to just have to find that strength to move on without her is just going to be so hard. And the way they portrayed y'all was just not right. This should have never happened. It's just been a nightmare. Like never in a million years should we be here.
Civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump, attorney for the family, this is what he said, quote, "They're killing our sisters just like they're killing our brothers. But for whatever reason, we have not given our sisters the same attention. Breonna's name should be known by everybody in America because she was in her own home doing nothing wrong." Again, the police executed a no-knock warrant. They had the wrong house. They were looking for a quote-unquote trap house, and the owner of the man in the house, Kenny, he had the same last name. That's all it took. He had the same last name. Kenneth Walker had the same last name as the guy that they were looking for. They were looking for two suspects. The other guy's name was Adrian Walker. Kenneth Walker, Adrian Walker. So Kenneth Walker pulled out a gun to protect the household that he was in. I don't know if it was his home or whatever, but he was there, and he pulled out his gun to protect the house, and they didn't shoot him. They shot her. There's so much going on with this story. It's so enraging at every single level. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. But the most obvious thing here is the devaluation of Black lives and the police state that Black communities constantly live under. Now, I've been saying this for years, and I'm kind of tired of saying it. If you believe that there is a police state in this country, then you have to believe that it first began in the Black community. The Black communities across this country live consistently underneath a police state, especially poor Black communities. The police go in with wanton disregard for human life and complete disregard for any human rights, any constitutional rights, any civil rights. I was thinking, like, as I introduced Ben Crump into the conversation, I said civil rights attorney. The fact that we have to have civil rights attorney is a test, and they primarily focus on the violation of civil rights by policing agencies and the state. That shows you the wanton disregard for the civil rights, particularly of Black people. And it happens over and over and over again. And too many times these stories play out because some judge, first of all, let's start at the beginning, because someone in some legislation authorized no-knock warrants to be approved by some judge who authorized this specific warrant that was carried out by incompetent police officers who got the wrong goddamn address. And then they killed people. Not the wrong people. They just killed people. We are living underneath the police state, and we have been for some time. And if you could see it in any other community, if you believe it at any level that we are living underneath the police state, then you better sure as hell believe that it started first in the Black community. And if you want to address the police state across the board, you better start by addressing what's happening in our Black communities across this country. From New York City underneath the leadership of Democrat Bill de Blasio, all the way down to Louisville, Kentucky, where Breonna Taylor, 26-year-old EMT, was killed by police executing a no-knock warrant at the wrong address.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
At this point of every episode, I'd like to take a minute to thank all of our newest patrons without whom this show is not possible. Welcome aboard to Alejandro Duarte. Thank you for becoming a patron. Rachel Fuqua, thank you for becoming a patron. Very special thank you to Tamara W. Thank you for becoming a patron. And Jay Stubbs, thank you for becoming a patron. Oh! With all of the politics, the injustices, and all around bad news going on around us, you got to take every now and then to just bop your head. Now everybody just bop your head. DC, I see you. The revolution will be synthesized. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious patron family by going to patreon.com/The BPD Show, where you get twice the content, uncut, unedited, unfiltered interviews without any of the advertisements like you're going to get right about here.
Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at www.thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Joining me now is Professor Harvey K. Harvey J. Kaye. He is the Ben and Joyce Rosenberg Professor of Democracy and Justice Studies and Director of the Center for History and Social Change at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. He is an award-winning author of several books, including Why Do Ruling Classes Fear History? The Fight for Four Freedoms. I want to talk to him today about two of his most recent books, Take Hold of Our History, Make America Radical Again, as well as FDR on Democracy. Professor, how are you doing today? Thanks so much for joining us.
I'm okay. It's great to see you after what must be several years since our last conversation.
Yeah, the last time we spoke was during the primaries of 2016, or maybe shortly thereafter. And the world has changed around us significantly. In this time of COVID-19 and the obvious policies, I think I've seen you tweet about it. A lot of us have tweeted about it. The things that we simply need to do to survive this, they parallel things that we should have been doing all along. They parallel the things like FDR's Economic Bill of Rights. It really signifies things that we should have been doing all along, yet and still, despite these basic policies, economic policies that would help the working class, that would help the middle class, despite those being the things that we need to survive this pandemic, it seems as though both Democrat and Republicans, the ruling party of this country, just refuse to do anything significant for the people, even though those are the things we need to do to survive this pandemic. What are your thoughts on the politics of this moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've said to people that in many ways, it's like we have three crises all at once. So for 45 years, American working people have suffered nothing less than a class war from above. Okay, a class war from above pursued by the corporate, for lack of a better word, bosses. A class war from above that has been enabled not only by conservative and reactionary Republican Party ever since the 1970s, but also by a very, to my mind, rather deferential Democratic Party. You know, in fact, in some cases, not simply deferential, but eager to participate by way of the neoliberal leaders who've commanded the Democratic Party. And, we can name names. In fact, people don't quite often realize that neoliberalism begins with Jimmy Carter in the late 1970s. And I know you're down in Atlanta, and I don't mean to get you in trouble. But,
No, it's fine.
okay, but it's, Carter, Clinton, Obama. I mean, we've seen neoliberalism over and over again, and that's all dealt with in the various books I've written these past several years. But the other thing is, on top of that, we then ended up after these 45 years with so much anger in working people. And I live in the state of Wisconsin, which is one of the three states that surprised everyone and voted, and the electoral college votes went to Donald Trump.
Right.
So now we have, we had this anger that led to, it's as if people wanted to sort of punch somebody, and they ended up punching not only their fellow citizens by voting for Trump, They end up punching themselves,
Yeah.
right? And then, so on top of the crisis of 45 years, we have this very, very intense, it's like class war on steroids we have right now. And then in the midst of this, and I'm sure when people thought about, well, what if we have a crisis? We thought of some kind of crisis like a war with Iran, something
Right.
that he would literally drag us into. It turned out we have a crisis that involves sort of, it's like a universal crisis to the extent that it's a pandemic,
Right.
okay, a global crisis. But as you were saying, here's the thing, that because the Democrats, or even once upon a time liberal Republicans, failed to enact in the wake of Medicare and Medicaid in the 60s, Medicare for all, or what we used to call universal health care, national health care. Because of that, we were utterly unprepared
Right.
to deal with the pandemic. And then to add to the tragedy, sorry, I get really, it just angers me because every time I saw a Democratic debate, the Republicans do what Republicans are supposed to do.
Mm.
They're supposed to benefit the business class, the corporate elite. It's the Democrats who always claim to be the party of the people, who
Right.
utterly abandoned the FDR labor tradition. FDR labor and even civil rights tradition, we could add to that. So what do we end up with? We end up with a series of debates among Democrats in which they constantly looked over at Bernie and attacked him, telling him, how could we possibly afford
Hmm.
Medicare for all, And then all of a sudden, we are hit in a deadly fashion. I mean, it must be up to 85,000 of our fellow citizens who have died in the course of this pandemic. And that's an incredible number of people. And even if we get used to even bigger numbers, and we can't help but ask ourselves how shameful the Democrats were to make the argument against Medicare for all,
Right.
when in the very wake of those utterly moronic arguments, utterly misguided arguments, we find ourselves in a crisis in which, even if we couldn't save all lives, we could surely have better addressed the pandemic. And moreover, think about it this way. With the numbers of people who are now out of work,
Right.
who have lost their direct access to their health insurance, we don't know when they'll be able to go back. I mean, we literally needed a social democratic America that had begun to develop in the 30s and the 60s, and we end up being a nation that our parents and grandparents and great grandparents would not even recognize.
Right. That's the disturbing thing about this moment is in the debates you could see the fallacious arguments. You could see them doing everything that they could to protect the status quo as it pertains to healthcare specifically, right? And then even now, in the face of 33 million was the latest number, 33 million people unemployed. No telling how many lost their insurance because obviously, like when you're covered, your family's covered. So there's probably even more Americans who are uninsured. But even now, they are not talking, they being at least the Democrats, right? They are not
Right.
even talking about reforming this system. They're talking about doubling down on it by using the federal government to fund COBRA, right? The exorbitant priced COBRA that people get when they lose their jobs. They would rather spend more money, which we've been doing for years, than to actually address the systemic level problem. I like the way that you framed it, and I want to juxtapose my question with this. With what you framed, that Republicans are doing what Republicans do, what they're supposed to do. They are operating in a manner that you would expect an opposition party to operate when they oppose any type of social democracy. But we don't have any opposition in the Democratic Party, right? Not against the Republicans, not against. So we are really living in a single party rule, underneath a single party rule, and yet they are demanding that we vote for them. They're demanding that we come out in the middle of a plague and a pandemic to vote for them. Where do you see this going in terms of the alignment, the working people, the Democratic Party, vote blue no matter who? In your estimate, how does this play out?
Well, let me just say that even now, and I hate to think of myself as naive. I mean, I turned 70 years old this past year, and I
Congratulations.
think of myself as naive, but I still cannot fathom, I cannot comprehend that the Democrats have not found it in themselves, that those of us on the left, ranging from labor to Black Lives Matter, right across the board, have not literally demanded and witnessed Biden, Schumer, Pelosi, and Barack Obama himself standing forth and saying, we see the light. We
Mm,
must have Medicare for all. Even now, I cannot fathom it.
mm,
Okay. Now, having said that, I think it would be foolish of me to say that we're in a good position to make these kinds of demands.
Okay.
I mean, the fact is that labor is weak, and it takes money even in the absence of a pandemic to put people on buses and on trains and on planes to get them to Washington. It's also the case that we're still a fragmented and fractured kind of movement. And in many ways, I'm sorry that Bernie pulled out in the fashion that he did so abruptly,
Right.
because he probably should have stayed on, if only to try to sort of articulate the movement all the more effectively, to literally project it into the future and to start pointing to the leaders of the future. Look, I think the squad is fantastic. However, there's a big age gap between Bernie Sanders and these first year or first term congressional women. And what we really needed is a little more sense of who are the other folks who are going to take charge of this movement, both politically and otherwise. Now, having said that, okay, those are my concerns. Having said that, we do have possibilities. Crises afford opportunities. So, for example, we've seen worker insurgency.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And it is essential for us, in whatever it takes, to get the voices of those worker insurgents out into the public realm. Now, that's tough because the mainstream media wants to ignore that or view it as simply a sort of a one-day wildcat thing or whatever else, which makes shows like yours, Working People with Max Alvarez, Michael Brooks, all of these kind of shows, all the more essential because young people and the vast audiences of podcast listeners need to know that there is this kind of thing, and we need to offer solidarity with them. It's also the case that we do have some figures who may well represent a possible direction to the future. Ro Khanna, the California congressman, Sarah Nelson, the labor leader. I mean, these folks probably represent the future of our movement if we can articulate a movement. Okay. So having said that, I don't know what to expect. I mean, it's difficult, but you can feel something happening.
Right.
And the question is, but nothing, let's not get anarchistic about it and assume that spontaneity is the answer to all this stuff. It's not. Okay. We're going to really have to cultivate leaders, and we're going to also have to consider the fact that we have an immediate crisis, and every solidarity that we can afford, we must develop. That's how I view it right now. And I've been doing a number of shows, and I was thrilled to be able to come back on with you after all these years. And I hope what I'm saying resonates with people. I mean, solidarity is absolutely essential. The book, Take Hold of Our History, Make America Radical Again, when I was putting it together, I had, call me naive again or a romantic, I had truly believed there was a great opportunity to secure the presidency with Bernie Sanders. And I, in that book, call for the creation of a united front or a popular front reminiscent of the 1930s. In many ways, even now, in the absence of a Sanders campaign, I still hope that we can cultivate that sensibility, that sense of identity, because whether it's Trump who stays president, in which case the battle is going to be very intense to avoid fascism, I fear, or for that matter, if Biden. Okay, and I have some thoughts about that. The fact is, we're still going to have to fight. We're going to have to make sure that we are not as deferential as we have been to these kinds of political figures.
The full interview is available to all of our patrons immediately after the music. We'll go right back into it. And the conversation, I promise you, it is critical, discussing the revolution and the revolutionary spirit of America and how we are currently underneath a regime that is rewriting that radicalism of America. And they no more have the right to claim what it means to be American than the radical tradition in America. So go to patreon.com to get access to that. Patrons, stay tuned. There's a whole lot more show to go after this music. For those of you who want access, patreon.com/the BPD show. Those of you who can't get access, thank you so much for just being here. You have been a beautiful audience, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.